Sweet Taste of Cake by The Descendant. Chapter 1. The Dance. Since the frosting seemed to be ready, Cupcake used the confectioner's cube to test it by gently placing a large white dollop across the nose of her husband. Carrick's eyes crossed. He looked first at the frosting, and then turned to her with a smile. As she tilted her head, her own smile grew, and answered his. With a little giggle, she went out to fetch more components of their unfolding creation. The sweet smell of gingerbread drifted around the kitchen of Sugar Cube Corner. The gingerbread came closer to being ready, the heat of the oven falling over them, draping its warmth in the soft smell of what sat within around the happy pair. The gingerbread house had been a special order. They had begun working on it as the day broke. The two went about purposely, determined that they would complete this work together, and that the two of them would bring it to fruition. Carrot prepared the board, laying the wax paper across it evenly so that it lay taut. He quietly surveyed it, his eyes focusing past the little mound of frosting as he inspected his work. Happy with his efforts, he surveyed the tools, the bowls, the spoons, and the measuring cups. All seemed ready for the crafting of the gingerbread house. All was in order. He closed his eyes. It was heartwarming eve, and he listened to Cupcake as she hummed a holiday tune. She felt the warmth of the oven shifting in unseen waves as he began to pull the trays from within. As they waited for the pieces to cool on the baking rack, they cut off any slight imperfections by slowly sawing away any speck, bubbled surface that blemished the gingerbread. With that, all that remained was to wait. She moved beside him and rubbed against the length of his body before nuzzling his chin. Ba-da-dum-dum-dum. Her humming brought his eyes down to hers, a remembrance growing in him as she did. She tossed her head and motioned towards the grouping of the largest and flattest of pieces, the ones that resembled a dance floor. Da-dum, dum-da-dum. She continued as he pressed against him, beginning to sway softly. He joined her in the rhythm as a memory of a day, now long past, swept across the two of them in time. Oh, don't look now, but I've got your first request for a dance coming down this way. The other mare stifled a giggle and lifted her head from her little drink. With cautious eyes and a toss of her gray mane, she lifted her gaze flit from behind her glasses. She saw the colt awkwardly making his way towards them, bouncing off dancers and waiting for other revelers to pass as he did. She smiled a bit and turned to her companion. I do believe you're mistaken, Cuppy dear, she said, lowering her head and whispering into the ear of her friend. It's the cake colt. She's had her eyes on you since we trotted in here. Cupcake glanced and spun her head around in exactly the same way as she had warned Ivory not to. There was a moment of panic as her eyes accidentally met the green ones of the colt. He blushed sheepishly as he waited for more dancers to part before him. Her head went to the table, the mare using one hoof to shield her from view. But that can't be Ive! She exclaimed as she startled. And why not? Because you always get to dance first. I hardly ever get asked, and when I do, it's this colt who know my father. Well, said Ivory happily, looking over the top of her glasses at all the ponies assembled within the dance hall. That's one streak that ends here rather soon. Oh, but Ive, what did I say? Pleaded Cupcake. My suggestion would be yes. Oh, hello, Carrot. How are you this evening? Hello, miss. He began, stretching his long neck forward and down, attempting to answer her, the giggling colt looking as small as he did. None of that, Carrot, she said with a smile. We are at Father's mill. Please, call me Ivory. Have you met my dear friend Cupcake? The colt's eyes lifted immediately, meeting the gaze he had sought all night. She spun to look at him, an uncertainty lying across her own face as she looked to the colt. He stared down to her, trying to speak, but instead getting caught in her eyes. Her beautiful, rose-colored eyes. He swam in them for an instant before finding his words. Oh, yes, I've seen you, Miss Cupcake, but I haven't had the chance. I wanted to introduce... Just ask her to dance already, Carrot. Uh, just ask her to dance already, Carrot. Both looked at the sipping mare, and then quickly back to each other again. Cupcake found herself staring upon a colt who obviously was growing more and more nervous as the moments passed. Would you care to dance? He asked, finally, swallowing his nerves. Cupcake looked at Ivory. The mare arched an eyebrow at her. She remembered her earlier advice, and she breathed a yes before putting her hoof in his. Ivory smirked to herself as the two ponies went off, watching Carrot do his best to clear the crowd so that they could pass. She usually hated being here on Fridays. It was always so crowded. Then again, that's why she always had demanded to come. She knew that today was the day Carrot came, hoping to hide in the crowd. That, of course, was why she had badgered Cupcake to accompany her. They were just barely visible among the throng of ponies, but she smiled to herself as she watched the couple begin an awkward little dance. She giggled softly, took another sip, and looked to the many eyes all muddy and looking at her. Friday. It was not the most graceful dance that the town hall had ever seen. Only the conversation was more awkward. Cupcake winced inwardly each time that the slack dog tried to speak, expecting each statement to be the one that would betray his interest in her father's business, thinking that the next few words would be the ones that revealed to him to be just like the other colts. The old dance floor groaned beneath the weight of the couples. Cupcake laughed a bit inwardly as this colt, Carrot, tried to simultaneously lead them across the floor and avoid the other dancers. As he tried to engage her in conversation, he would suddenly look rather perturbed and turn to apologize to a blushing mare or a scowling colt. He would then ask her where they had been going with the conversation as he had blushed. She found herself smiling as he both tried to focus on her and quickly stammered through apologies. As he quickly went through the last of what she recognized were obvious practice questions, Cupcake realized that he had only been asking about her. That he really was only interested in her. Her sympathy rose for the gang colt as he sighed. This isn't going too well. No, it isn't. She answered over the music and the hum of the crowd. To her alarm, he seemed to deflate. But, she continued, running her hoof along his foreleg, much to her own surprise and his. Please don't stop trying. Carrot's ears came up. He lifted his head and looked to the open windows of the dance hall. Beyond them, the hanters hung from the eaves of the porch, bubbled in pools of light, holding back the gathering dusk. Miss Cupcake, he stuttered, took another breath, and apologized to another couple that spun away before he had finished speaking. Do you think we could head out to the porch? Oh, I thought you'd never ask, she giggled. Cupcake tucked in beside him as he used his frame to slice between the couples and crowd. At her table, Ivory watched them fight out through the doors on the far left side of the hall, the ones nearest the bandstand. Well, Steve thought with a slight chuckle, that certainly took long enough. The flickering lights in the lanterns competed with the flash of lightning bugs in the grass beyond the dance hall. As Carrot and Cupcake moved from the glow of one lantern to the next, they looked for an open spot along the railing. Soon they had found one. They sat there, looking out past Ponyville to the fields of grass beyond where the insects appeared as pinpricks of light that erupted in flow along the wobbling trails. Oh, I should have asked if you would like to drink, he said, putting his hoof across his eyes. Oh no, I'm all right, she said, looking down, running her hoof across the splinter. The old dance hall had seen better days. Perhaps it did not have much time left, despite its popularity. She realized that he had gone quiet, the colt simply looking at her and blushing. She thought about that for a moment, and then returned to smile. He had used up all of his prepared questions. He was out of things to say. He did not know how to go on. All of his carefully practiced words had been spent back out there on the noisy, crowded dance floor. Yet he still sat there blushing. still looking at her with a small, dopey smile. I thank you for the dance. I've really wanted to talk with you ever since I saw you walking with Miss Ivory over at the mill, he began. Oh yes, I saw you peeking at me that one time, and the other time, she answered, her voice showing that she could discuss. Oh, you did? I wasn't. I mean, I didn't mean to stare, but... She smiled, moved a bit closer to him. She sat beside him as the little pools of lantern light fell over them. No, it's fine. Thank you, she said softly. I never get asked to dance all that much. I always get asked first, and I have to sit there, don't you know? All the pretty males get asked before I do. The ones who aren't as round. You aren't that round, he said. At once, the colt bolted in place, shark watching over him. With a sigh, he lowered his head onto the railing of the porch. Resting it there, she looked down with subtle disappointment. I should have said, you aren't round. That's what I was supposed to say, right? Carrot, turning his head slightly, looking at her with one eye. This isn't going well. She gave a little laugh, slowly rested her head on the railing as well, turning it so that way she peered at him with a small smile. He looked ridiculous, slowly banging his head on the cold, weather-worn railing that rattled and shook with each strike, but he had wanted to talk with her. Dance with her, even just for a little while. Was just interested in meeting her. Just her. Well, no, it isn't, but, she said softly, please, don't stop trying. Carrot ceased his self-depreciation and waiting for the sawdust to stop falling from the ancient railings before slowly turning his head. She was leaning on it too, her face being revealed as he tilted slowly toward her. There was a soft expression over her face, and her perfect rose-colored eyes caught his as she sat in the lantern light. Those eyes. The porch was mostly deserted now. The other couples who had been crowding it had either broken up in disappointment, or, for those of whom the evening was progressing much more pleasantly, had made for the field of tall grass and woods just beyond. The music of the dance hall began again, the sound drifting over them through the open windows. Began the music once more, floating out to where they had stood beside the railing. She lifted her foreleg, waving it toward him just a little bit. He lifted himself, gathered up her off her hoof, and led her to the open space of dance windows. Da-dum, dum, da-dum, da-dum. Continued the song as they began their dance once more. Together they swayed back and forth as the tune fell over them. As they moved from pool of light to pool of light did the lanterns cast over the long porch. She moved her eyes from his, touching her cheek to his just for an instant before laying her head across his withers. With that they danced their dance for a good long while, as fireflies flashed among the tall grass and in the woods beyond. Being Quarry means that since the day you were old enough to say your name, you have known it to have two meanings. Being Quarry means feeling your strength, knowing where to pull resources from, how to accomplish things. It means being resourceful, strong, and forceful like the very rock of the world's foundation. Being Quarry also means feeling pursued, hunting. It means feeling, knowing, that they always are trying to take everything from you. Being Quarry means having to be strong, proud, and if need be, brittle. The walls of the gingerbread house lifted easily from the wax paper. Carefully, delicately, the two ponies removed each piece from the paper, laying large parts and slide daintily upon the dyeing rack. Cupcake looked the largest sexes over, glancing up to her husband as he nodded at each piece approvingly. She giggled quietly to herself as he turned away, knowing that the large bit of frosting still clung to his nose. that it still stood secretly where she had laid it as the project had begun. He readied himself before the board, wordlessly taking out this familiar spot that he had occupied every time they worked on a project of this type. With that, the two began a familiar dance, one that they had practiced time and time again, and yet each time was new and wonderful. He held up the first two pieces of the gingerbread in place. He held the one that would become a wall to the foundation. Slowly, Cupcake drew the confectioner's tube all along the inside seam, leaving a trail of perfectly even frosting to bind the pieces of gingerbread together. With practiced hooves, they followed these steps, attaching new component, laying this firm foundation that the gingerbread house had depended upon. Finally, after long, cautious, and wordless moments, they had completed the foundation. To Kara's surprise, she finished the last seam by stepping into his outstretched forelegs as he had held the two halves together. As the frosting emptied for the tube, the last line was completed. He stepped back into his chest, resting there as if both wanted to see if it would stand on its own. As he moved into his embrace, he lifted his head so that way the dollop of frosting on his nose would not catch in her mane. He carefully lowered his head again, laying his cheek to hers as they watched, waited, and hoped that what they had built could stand long enough to become one solid piece. In their thoughts, the two raced back to a time when things had not been so certain, when they too were just starting to make a foundation. "You don't need to keep poking around corners, Cubby," said Ivory, flipping through some papers on the desk. "I promise you he's here. We'll go in a minute. Look, that's his name on the typeseat." Cupcake stopped peering scarcely up and down the mill floor from the office door and looked instead to the large board that hung on the wall. She followed the long list of names until her eyes settled on his. Carrot Cake, it read in small and rather plain script. She looked at the little name for a lingering moment. "Oh, Ive, do you think he'll ask me to, she said, turning within the office. Ivory slowly moved from the stack of papers, lifting them seemingly at random, and giving each one an introspective hum. "I don't see why not. He was quite taken with you Friday. As a matter of fact, I don't see why he hadn't asked you then." She spoke, settling her paper down. I honestly don't know why. I can't see why he hadn't asked you then." Looking puzzled. Cookie only barely heard Ivory's puzzlement. She had already turned to the door and was staring up and down the long reaches of the mill. "Oh, Ive, what am I going to do if he doesn't ask me?" she asked in a worried tone. "Well, then you shall have to be the one who asked him," replied the other mayor as he watched Cupcake steal long looks outside the door. Cupcake turned again, the mayor almost looking surprised. Is it okay to do that?" she asked in earnest. "I mean, I don't think... Oh, Ive, help me! You've done this so many more times than I have!" Ivory arched an eyebrow, raised one of her front legs. "Oh, I don't mean it that way! You know I don't!" She called Cupcake as she trotted back on quick toes to where her oldest friend stood. She nuzzled Ivory's chin, drawing the mayor's head up to her withers. As he did, Cupcake spoke in a high, almost worried tone. I don't know why I'm like this. I've just been thinking about him all weekend." She said, still resting her head on the withers of the other mare. "He just wanted to talk with me. He had been trying since he first saw me. He didn't care that I'm a little round, don't you know? Me, I've not talk about my father, or his business, just me. Oh, Ive, why do I feel this way?" Ivory laughed a small laugh and laid her head deeper against Cupcake's. "You honestly don't know, do you? You honestly don't. Oh, Cubby, you have no idea how dear you are," Ivory said in a quiet tone as she let her friend rest upon her for a moment longer. Cupcake lifted her head and looked at Ivory as though she wanted to ask a question. Before she could speak, Ivory had already gathered up her hoof and was leading her out the door. With a small gasp, Cupcake entered the mill floor. As they went, slight traces of stray flour fell through the sash of light that came in through the windows. High above the bagging rooms, great belts turned wheels that drove the machinations of the mill. As the great water wheel turned the waters of the river into power to drive the machines, it cast cynical sounds into the high, hot places in the mill. In one such place, a colt struggled, cursing himself as a bag of flour he was supposed to be tending to fell to the floor. He knew enough not to put the spilled flour back in the bag. As still more flour came pouring out of the grindstones, he fought to figure out what to do with what had fallen out of the large sack. He kicked at it, tried to clear it away. All that had accomplished was make the flour rise up in a cloud that stained his flakes white. Carrot sighed as the supervisor, Trammell, caught sight of him and began trotting towards his stall. "I'm sorry, Trammell. It just got away from me," Carrot said, gathering the broom into the space beneath his shoulder and his foreleg, sweeping as much of the flour as he could into the sill.
"Good Lord! This is your second misbag this morning," spoke the larger earth pony. "You're mostly working to that. Or are you well?"
"Well, no, I mean, yes. Oh, no, I don't mean I'm sick of you or anything, but, began Carrot, taking a deep sigh, trying his best to find the new bag in the filling position, even as he cleared the old one away. "I met a mayor Friday at the old dance hall, and all weekend I've been... Trammell arched an eyebrow and smiled slightly as the blissful expression fell over the face of the colt. "I've been thinking about her all weekend," he said softly as he looked up to Trammell. "You've met her, actually. Well, seen her. She's Miss Ivory's friend, Miss Cupcake. You know, the mayor who's here with her from time to time." Trammell took a step back, called out in a sing-song voice from the line of bagging halls.
"Hello? What's this? Fellows, it turns out our carrot cake likes the round ones!"
Laughter came from the nearby bagging stalls, rising even over the sounds of the belts and wheels. Soon, nearby colts were shouting their own opinions.
"Hey, Stumpsuds! What you look for in a mayor? Pretty works. I ain't picky."
Trammell's smile dropped as he turned back and saw Carrot Cake staring at the floor. "She's not that round." The colt raised his head to the newly filled bag of flour, lifted it to the constantly turning belt of bins. With that, it was first raised and over the wheel, then far down into the mill below.
"I'm sorry, my lad,"
said Trammell as he cleared the last of the spilled flour.
"Didn't mean anything by it. Did you ask for a date?"
There was a thud. Trammell looked up to see the weak-jawed colt banging his head against the inside of the stall. "No! I wanted to! I just froze up! I can't believe it! I froze up!" Carrot banged his head against the stall once more, and turned back to his bag.
"All I could do as Miss Ivory came to take her home was say goodnight over and over like an idiot!
I'm sure she liked dancing with me. I think she even liked being with me," Carrot said, his voice getting stronger as he spoke. "She's so beautiful, but that's not even half of it. She was so understanding, and when things went wrong, she was calm, certain, forgiving." Carrot turned to the older pony, looking for advice. "Trammell, what am I going to do? Don't know why I felt this way. I've never felt this way for a mare before," he asked the older pony. Carrot saw something of panic shoot through the eyes of his supervisor as the question drifted among the clouds of flour.
"It appears as though you've had a chance to explore these feelings, lad. Here comes the big fish's daughter, and she's got your fair damsel with her,"
said Trammell as he raced off to make sure his floor was spick and span.
"Oh, Celestia!"
cried Carrot, darting back of his bagging stall as he heard the hoofs of Ivory and Cupcake draw closer. He ran his forelegs through his mare to straighten it. As he realized that he just streaked flour through his mane, he yelled at himself, beat his body against the stall to stake loose of whatever flour he could, and then turned his back and attempted to look as though he had heard them coming. His eyes went wide as he realized that this bag was nearly full and was only seconds from tipping over. He quickly pushed in the clutch, pulled out the old bag, and placed the new one beneath the grindstone's outlet. As he reached the clutch flour once more, he poured into his stall. Then, with surprised effort, he lifted the large bag into the constantly circling containers and watched it first travel up and then down past the wheel into the mill below. He turned around just in time to see the tails of Cupcake and Ivory pass by, having missed him completely while his back was turned to them. He sank against the stall wall with a disgusted sound.
Why couldn't it be easy?
Ivory smiled as they crossed the floor, nodding and greeting her father's employees. Cupcake's head, however, was on a swivel, the mare looking left and right, searching the bagging flour as they went. As they came upon the bagging stile, she heard Ivory's name called over the sound of grindstones. Seeing that it was the supervisor who called for them, they tried to where he waited. "Good morning, Trammell," spoke Ivory.
Good morning, Miss Script, and a good morning to you, Miss Cupcake.
Cupcake smiled to him and replied, happy that the supervisor had somehow remembered her name. He looked at her knowingly, a sly smile that could not quite place upon sitting on his face.
Miss Cupcake?
She heard her name called over the sounds of belts.
Miss Cupcake!
It came again, competing with the wheels. She looked up and down the mill floor, at once both anxious and eager. She thought it had come from the bagging stalls, yet, when she looked that way, there was only ever a flash of movement. Cupcake spun and looked up the length of the mill in the other direction. Had it been an illusion? No sooner had she done so than her name came ringing out again from the stalls. She spun in time to miss it once more. Ivory giggled to herself. Even as she continued to speak with Trammell, she lifted her left rear hoof and planted firmly against Cupcake's posterior. With slightly more than a gentle nudge, she sent her friend cantering down the line of bagging stalls. Trammell looked at Ivory with a meaningful smirk. Ivory tossed her head in a gesture to follow, and soon they were watching the scene as it unfolded. Cupcake cautiously crept along the stalls, poking her head into each slightly. As he came to the last one in line, she poked her head within. Carrot turned from the bag again, upset at having to call out to her in such an ungentle way, having to shout over the belt.
Miss Cupcake!
He began, turning to the opening of the stall. With that, their noses met. For a long moment they stood there, nose to nose, green eyes cast down into the pool of rose-colored ones. The dude held their gaze for what seemed like a perfect eternity. With that, flour began pouring out of Carrot's back.
Oh! I'm sorry!
Cried Cupcake, nosing the white rising cloud. Carrot turned to face the unfolding disaster. He caught the bag just in time, trying to go through the motions while still speaking to her.
No, it's fine!
Pressing the clutch with one hoof, trying to adjust the bag.
It's fine, really!
As he tried to place the new bag on the siphon, he tried to speak with her again. His foot came off the clutch just long enough for a single poof of flour to shower his forelegs.
Oh dear, I really didn't mean to. Really? It's okay, I was so sorry. No, yes, thank you!
He said as he slid the new one across the spigot. As he did, he lifted the bag up to the containers, giving a little groan as he did from an unfamiliar position, leaving room for her within the stall. I was hoping you'd be around today.
I had a great time at the... Clutch! I'm glad. Dance! Right now?
The two continued this stirring conversation. Soon, stifled giggles around them.
You're no help, Ive! You're no help at all!
Called Cupcake, giving a disapproving glance.
Hello, you two. I do believe we charged for double accurate... Hello, you two. I do believe we charged for double occupancy. I say, did you remember to sign in on the tie sheet before starting today, Miss Cupcake?
Asked Trammell with a small laugh of his own.
Yeah,
spoke Cupcake, touching her hoof to Carrot's foreleg, instantly capturing attention.
Let's do it this way, alright?
Soon as she had worked out a system, Carrot marveling at her decisiveness. Shortly, they were able to work and speak with each other at the same time.
What I was trying to say is that I really had a great time dancing,
she said as she depressed the clutch, scooting a bag a filled bag closer to the moving containers. I'm so glad, Carrot replied, removing the filled bag and placing a new one beneath the siphon. He then lifted the filled bag just as he had placed over the containers. I was really hoping it did, he said as he blessed. Well, yes, and, well, I did, she replied. For a moment, they worked silently. Ivory closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Carrot did as well, turned to face the mayor that stood beside him. I was wondering, Miss Cupcake, maybe you'd like to... Yes? Really? I'm sorry? What? She began, taking her hoof off the clutch in confusion. In an instant, their newfound regiment broke down, and flour once more flowed out of the spigot. As Ivory and Tremble laughed, Carrot attempted to place a new bag while moving the full one to the containers. The colt simultaneously holding the clutch at a display of aerobic prowess. This left lifting the large bag the only useful thing Cupcake could do. She attempted to have the large, heavy sack into the hopper, giving a cry as he missed it fractions within an inch. Rear hooves danced as he stood upon them, missing a second hopper as well, and with that she began to topple. I got you! Carrot called, seeing what was about to happen. At once, his forelegs came up around her. His body lifted her, his hooves slid across the length of her forelegs from behind, pushing the bag higher, leaving her as he wrapped around her legs. For Cupcake that movement grew as he drifted around her. As his forelegs met hers, as his frame encompassed her, the sensation of being in contact with him flashed through her. To her, it was as though they were dancing again. Of all the wonderful feelings they had shared rose up in her once more. She did not know why, but as he held the bag above them, she surrendered her hold on it. She willfully leaned up back his chest, settled there, let her head lay there. It felt welcoming, inviting. She gave a small gasp of realization, finally in that instant realizing why he had been in her head over those last few days. As he gave her a gasp, it dove through him like a soft call of doves. At once, the feel of her upon his chest filled him, and he went stark still. Gravity was unimpressed by the touching scene that was played out, and simply pulling on a string of causality. With that, the bag of flour tumbled over them. Ivory's hoof had grown to her mouth in alarm. But as the flour cleared, it revealed two figures unharmed by the accident. Her alarm gave way to a tearful expression as she saw how closely the two figures stood, covered together from forehead to hoof in a perfect coating of white. Cupcake felt Carrot's foreleg lift from her eyes. As he did, she realized he had placed him there at the last instant, keeping her safe from harm. She turned to look up how. The entirety of the weak-jawed coat was covered in flour. As Travel pulled to safety, it ended a cascade of flour pouring from the spigot. Cupcake smiled and lifted her hoof to his face. Carrot felt Cupcake's hoof drawing across him, swam in her soft touch as she removed the flour from over his eyes. Soon he heard her say, There, come now. He blinked, and soon green eyes once more met rose-colored ones. Miss Cupcake, he said as he blinked, his smile flowing through the flour. I would like to see you again. Can I please have a date? Oh, I'd love to, she said, placing her hoof alongside his as they sat looking into one another. Little puffs froze around them. I'd love to. How about this Saturday? Yes, sure, he said, his awkwardness returning. You at the gazebo? Yes, that sounds wonderful, she answered as she blushed brightly, the hue visible through her new coat of white. Around them, the flowers swirled, and for a long time their eyes laid upon another. As Ivory led Cupcake off to get cleaned up, she could not help but notice how well the two meshed up, arrayed together as they were in white. Saturday, said Cupcake, looking back up to where he stood. At the gazebo. Noon, righty? Righty, he answered. She trotted away with a giggle as a beaming Ivory followed, leaving pools of flour across the floor in her wake. After a moment, Carrot stepped forward. He found her footprint left behind in a flower. He could not know why, but he felt himself selecting the most perfect one. An odd sensation floated over him. Before he had even contemplated the act, he had pressed his hoof into the flower beside it. The two prints stood there together in the thin sea of flour, side by side, Within him, something sang happily.
Go home, lad. You're coming down with something. You're no good to me at the moment.
I'm sorry. Am I ill? Replied Carrot. I don't feel sick. I feel great, actually.
I should say so,
Replied Trammel as he cleared the flour from the stall.
That's one of the symptoms of lovesickness, you know.
Carrot looked back to the stallion as insight grew on his face. At once, his eyes fell back upon the two perfect hoofprints as his face lit with enlightenment. I'm falling in love. Oh, Celestia, I'm falling in love!